Getting to work. President Trump signs executive orders at the beginning of his first full week. Marching for women's rights.
I wish that we could find a way to lovingly disagree with one another.
Pro-life women react to marches all over the country where they were not welcome. Pope Francis on the record. In a new interview with the Spanish paper, the Holy Father gives us his take on how to judge political leaders. Life as a First Lady. We get a glimpse of the vital role the president's wife plays at the White House. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 23rd, 2017. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump moves to pull the United States out of the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact. He's dealing a quick blow to Barack Obama's legacy as he begins his first full week in office. President Donald Trump enters his first official week in the White House, signing 3 executive orders.
Great thing for the American worker, what we just did.
They include an order withdrawing the U.S. from the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact, fulfilling a campaign promise. He reinstated the Mexico City policy, a ban on providing federal money to international groups that perform abortions. And Trump implemented a freeze on most government hiring.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Earlier in the day, Trump huddled with business leaders, warning them he'd tax companies that move manufacturing out of the U.S.
And we're going to start making our products again. And there'll be advantages to companies that do indeed make their products here.
The president focused on his agenda today after a tumultuous first weekend in office, consumed by his criticism of the media's coverage of his inauguration. In his first meeting with a foreign leader, Trump will host British Prime Minister Theresa May at the end of this week. He also said he's setting up a meeting with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. And one of those executive orders is a major step in the fight to protect life. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has more tonight on the so-called Mexico City policy. Jason?
Wyatt, that policy strips U.S. aid from groups that perform or even promote abortion. Now, most Americans agree with that type of ban. That's according to a new poll commissioned by the Knights of Columbus. They find 83% of Americans oppose the use of tax money for abortion abroad.
Next is the policy in regard to Mexico City.
With the stroke of a pen, a new chapter begins.
That's it.
Thank you, Press.
Thank you very much.
One of his first acts as president, Donald Trump bans federal funds for international groups performing abortions. His press secretary says it shows his commitment to the cause.
The president, it's no secret, has made it very clear that he's a pro-life president. He wants to stand up for all Americans, including the unborn. And I think the reinstatement of this policy is not just something that echoes that value, but respects taxpayer funding as well, and ensures that we're standing up not just for life of the unborn, but for also taxpayer funds that are being spent overseas to perform an action that is contrary to the values of this president, and I think continue to further illustrate, not just to the folks here in this country, but around the world, of what a value we place on life.
The so-called Mexico City policy is a political hot potato. It was put into place by President Reagan in 1984, then stopped by President Bill Clinton, reinstated by President George W. Bush, and stopped again by President Obama.
By Presidents Clinton and Obama getting rid of the Mexico City policy, it has been very damaging for unborn children around the world. In the first year of President Obama's term, 2009, we were talking about $461 million.
The top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee vows to fight Trump's order. He says President Trump is denying millions of women access to much-needed family planning services. But the House Majority Leader says funding abortions abroad is far outside America's national interest. Our foreign policy is shaped by our values, and supporting life is among our most sacred. For National Right to Life President Carol Tobias, the decision was simple.
We just don't want our tax dollars being used to do anything that would promote the killing of children.
House Speaker Paul Ryan says President Trump wasted no time in acting on his promises. Tonight, Ryan will join Democratic and Republican leaders for a meeting with President Trump at the White House to discuss his agenda. Wyatt?
Jason, what's on deck in terms of other pro-life legislation this week?
Well, tomorrow in the House, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act will be voted on. This bill would make the Hyde Amendment a permanent part of U.S. law. The Hyde Amendment is passed each year and bans taxpayer funds from going to abortion inside the United States.
Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. 2 Republican senators say they're putting together legislation to change Obamacare, not dismantle it. Senators Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Susan Collins of Maine say the Patient Freedom Act would let states keep Obamacare or design their own programs.
We want to ensure that individuals relying on the current system do not experience a needless and avoidable gap in coverage.
The 2 senators say their plan follows the GOP philosophy of shifting some power from Washington to state governments. Cassidy says he wants the bill to come before Congress this year. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer tells the media the Trump administration wants a healthy, transparent relationship with the press.
I believe that we have to be honest with the American people. I think sometimes we can disagree with the facts. There are certain things that we may not fully understand when we come out, but our intention is never to lie to you.
Spicer faced questions today during his first press briefing after denouncing media reports that the crowd at Trump's inauguration was smaller than at his predecessor's 8 years ago.
These attempts to lessen the enthusiasm of the inauguration are shameful and wrong.
Official numbers of those in attendance at the inauguration were not released, so photos are being used to compare the crowd on Friday with the crowd at President Obama's first inauguration. Pro-life groups were pushed to the side this weekend at women's marches across the country. Marches in Washington, D.C. and across the U.S. drew hundreds of thousands of people. They protested against President Donald Trump and pushed for greater access to abortion.
Women will be hidden no more. We will not remain hidden figures. We have names. We're complete human beings, and they cannot police us.
Political leaders and activists spoke about a wide range of issues, including abortion, climate change, immigration policy, and gay rights. The marches weren't limited to the U.S., taking place around Europe and beyond. Australia was the scene of the first major international march. Thousands joined an anti-Trump protest in downtown Sydney. Organizers say the goal was to show opposition to the values they think President Trump represents. Here in Washington, Students for Life attended the women's protest. The pro-life group showed solidarity, but made it clear that women's rights need to include the rights of the unborn.
As a pro-lifer, I'm very pro-women, and I think human rights include the preborn, include everyone, and I think this march is excluding that population. So I'm marching with everything they stand for except for that one thing and saying, you know, I march for all women, even before birth.
A pro-life stance is pro-woman, it's pro-child, even for unborn women, and so we march along with the women that are here.
We need to make sure that when we're saying we care about children, we care about babies, that we're saying we care about women too, and this is what is best for women.
It wasn't always peaceful. Members say they were harassed and ridiculed for holding signs saying abortion betrays women. Joining us now is Charmaine Yoest, Senior Fellow with American Values, and Reagan Barklage, Western Regional Director for Students for Life. Charmaine, as a leader in the pro-life movement, having covered all this, what did you learn about the feminist movement during Saturday's march?
Well, you know, I think the important thing is that the feminists really betrayed their true colors. The fact that they came out with a hard and fast line and said that pro-life women were not welcome. That should be a wake-up call to women across the country, that this is a very radicalized modern feminist movement, and the fact that we're not welcome as pro-life women is pretty significant.
And Reagan, you were at the march, obviously in the minority being pro-life. What was the reaction from other marchers? How did they treat you?
Well, I mean, obviously we weren't invited, like Charmaine said, and that's funny as an all-inclusive women's march to disinvite, you know, women. When we got there, we obviously were not welcome. We led the march at the end with our Abortion Betrays Women banner. And then at the end, we came back and we held up our banner and signs. We were spit at, yelled at, someone tore up our signs. It was ridiculous, but we did have some people leave the march and join us and take a stand for life, so that was really awesome.
Charmaine, historically, women who have fought for women's right to vote have been pro-life. I mean, you look, it's there. How has that message sort of been hijacked by the pro-abortion movement?
Well, you know, the modern feminists really do betray their heritage. Susan B. Anthony, very strong pro-lifer, many others. So, you know, what really happened, and to condense a lot of history into a very short period of time, is that the feminists took this precious American concept of equality and really distorted it in saying that women needed to be just like men in order to be equal. And abortion is a fundamental part of that. Abortion undergirds the modern feminist movement as kind of a backstop to trying to create this false equality between men and women.
Well, there are still so many pro-lifers here in the United States. Reagan, was there anything that you found when you were talking with these people on the other side that you could find some sort of common ground?
You know, absolutely. We are all about empowering women, and for Students for Life, it's at the college campus, and we want to empower women that they can be a student and a mom. They don't have to make that hard choice of abortion. And so at Students for Life, we have a Pregnant on Campus initiative where we work with campuses to make it friendly for students who are parents, and by putting diaper decks in the bathrooms, lactation rooms, daycare, and all of that. And that's something that the other side should be all on board with.
Yeah, but they haven't traditionally. That's part of the conflict, I imagine. Charmaine, what would you say to people though who care about these issues, these women's issues, but they're pro-life? I mean, where do they go to have a voice?
Well, you know, one of the most controversial things that I say in speeches and in talks with pro-abortion groups is the idea that pro-life is pro-woman. That just makes them crazy. They can't, they fundamentally reject that. And so I think as pro-life women, we really need to take that challenge and run with it and be better at articulating that consistently over time, forcing that conversation on the national consciousness that pro-life is pro-woman, and that's what we're really all about.
Reagan, do you have any tips with regards to that? I mean, talking with somebody who claims to be pro-choice, how do you sort of get them to begin to understand your perspective?
Right. I mean, we want to empower women and show them that they are strong enough to be a mom and a student, or, be a mom and even place your child for adoption. It's not, you don't have to be pro-woman by pro-abortion, and that seems to be something that the other side is pushing, especially with their whole abortion positive messaging now.
Very important issues here. We're glad to have both of you all on the program to talk about this. Charmaine Yoest, Senior Fellow with American Values, and Reagan Bartledge, Western Regional Director, Students for Life. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Emergency crews searching the area near a hotel buried by an avalanche in central Italy make a discovery. They found 3 puppies alive in the rubble. Rescuers hold out hope they'll also find some of the 23 missing people, but conditions at the site are deteriorating, with the snow turning to ice. So far, 9 people have been rescued. 6 others died after the avalanche. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, prays for those victims during his Sunday Angelus. The Holy Father described new and harsh trials resulting from the natural disasters and devastating winter in Italy. Pope Francis says he'll wait before forming an opinion about President Trump. The Holy Father telling a Spanish newspaper he doesn't like judging people early. We'll see what Trump does. Joining us now from Rome is Mary Shevlin. Mary, the Pope gave this interview on Friday, the day of the inauguration. What signal is Francis sending to the Trump administration?
I think besides the telegram that he sent Wyatt, which, of course, he said he prayed that his decisions would be guided by the ethical and spiritual values that have always shaped America. What we hear in this interview is also Pope Francis's concern not only for Donald Trump as a world leader, but for all world leaders, and that is for the poor and for the downcast, to not put up walls, of course, but to build bridges and to be in dialogue. So I think he did choose to give the interview on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration. There is something maybe to be read into that, and I do think it was also addressed to world leaders at large and people who may be overcome with a little bit of fear at the popular level. Your average man on the street, and so many elections are taking place this year. I think that is something weighing on Pope Francis's mind, the fear that may be driving some people as they head to the polls.
Pope Francis also had a warning about relying too much on political leaders. What did he say?
Well, he said, he pointed actually to Germany in the 1930s. He said, we have to remember that Hitler was elected, and that was largely because of the fear being experienced by the German people. He said, when we're afraid, this clouds our judgment and can lead us to make hasty decisions. As he mentioned, when asked about Donald Trump's presidency, he said, we need to judge it all by very concrete facts. Let's not be overcome by our fears. Let us judge on concrete facts, which are hopefully rooted in the concern for the human person. I think that's the message that he was trying to send.
Has the Vatican said or indicated when Pope Francis and President Trump might meet?
It's a little too early to tell. Of course, this is the first Monday of President Trump's presidency. He's still getting many calls from world leaders from all over the world. But if we look at history, we know that on this year's calendar is the G7 summit. That's going to take place here in Italy and Sicily at the end of May. So if he doesn't come to the Vatican before then, it's very likely on his way to that G7 summit at the end of May that he would stop here in the Vatican. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, we'll definitely be following everything that happens with Pope Francis, especially that meeting if it does happen in May. Mary Shevlin, our producer in Rome. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pope Francis promotes life on his Instagram account. The Holy Father writes, anyone who is Christian has a duty to bear this witness to the gospel, to protect life courageously and lovingly in all its phases. Francis sends his support for the March for Life Paris. Tens of thousands of pro-life supporters took to the streets yesterday to protest abortion. The March for Life Paris posted this video on its Twitter page. And from Paris to San Francisco, thousands of Americans marched on Saturday in the 13th annual Walk for Life West Coast. There in San Francisco, the route stretched for almost 2 miles. The event took place just hours before San Francisco's Women's March. The largest pro-life event of the year is coming up here in Washington, D.C. EWTN will have complete coverage this Friday. We'll be broadcasting the March for Life live from 9 until 5:30 Eastern, followed by EWTN News Nightly at 6 p.m. Coming up, President Trump turns to his faith.
With the faith in each other and the faith in God, we will get the job done.
His message to new White House staffers and cabinet confirmations, who may soon join Trump's team. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Senators consider President Trump's pick to lead the Central Intelligence Agency. Kansas Representative Mike Pompeo is a West Point and Harvard Law School graduate. His confirmation vote was delayed until today because some senators questioned whether or not he supported waterboarding and other enhanced interrogation techniques. Trump and Pompeo both visited the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia on Saturday. Trump assured intelligence officials of his support despite his criticism of the agency following the election. Trump's nominee for Secretary of State gets support from Florida Senator Marco Rubio today. Rex Tillerson is the former head of Exxon who developed a business relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That raised questions from Senator Rubio. The committee's top Democrat still isn't convinced. Ben Cardin is upset that Tillerson won't call Russia and Syria's atrocities war crimes. More of Trump's cabinet nominees face hearings tomorrow. Ben Carson for Housing and Urban Development, Tom Price for Health and Human Services, and Jeff Sessions for Attorney General. Republicans criticize Democrats for not moving faster, but Democrats promise a thorough debate. A legal watchdog group is filing a lawsuit alleging President Trump is violating the Constitution by allowing his businesses to accept payments from foreign governments. The White House says the president has no conflicts. Over the weekend, the president spoke at a swearing-in ceremony for top aides, cheering them on as they get to work on his agenda, a task he believes they are ready to tackle with a little help from above.
We will face many challenges, but with the faith in each other and the faith in God, we will get the job done. We will prove worthy of this moment in history, and I think it may very well be a great moment in history.
Trump also held up the letter he received from outgoing President Obama, although he did not reveal to the press the contents of the letter. Up next, amazing artwork for all to see. The Vatican offers a new look at its masterpieces and a look at First Ladies through the years. A White House photographer takes us behind the scenes. Pope Francis sends a tweet today saying, "Be not afraid, for I am with you. Let us communicate hope and trust in our time." Thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A former employee of the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, known as SNAP, has filed a lawsuit claiming wrongful termination for challenging the organization's misbehavior. The lawsuit accuses SNAP of getting kickbacks from attorneys who sue the church on behalf of sexual abuse victims. The Catholic News Agency has much more on this story. You can read its report now at catholicnewsagency.com. The Holy Father stresses the need for education and preparation before marriage. In his annual speech to the Vatican's High Court, Pope Francis said marriage prep isn't just to guard against invalid union, but to strengthen the faith of the couple. The Holy Father delivers a speech to the Roman Rota each January to inaugurate the court's judicial year. The Vatican museums launch a new mobile-friendly website today featuring high-resolution images. The project has been 3 years in the making. The website is now available in 5 languages and includes over 3,000 images, 57 videos, and virtual tours. The designer says the innovations support the mission of the Vatican museums.
Like all the other museums, to preserve, to share, to educate, at the same time to evangelize through art and faith.
The Vatican Museums also unveiled a new YouTube channel today to highlight the Vatican's masterpieces of art and faith. The videos will help people who can't visit the museums in person. Encouraging news for former President George H.W. Bush and former First Lady Barbara Bush. Doctors at Houston Methodist Hospital say President Bush is still suffering from pneumonia, but is well enough to leave the intensive care unit. His wife Barbara Bush was discharged from the same hospital after being treated for bronchitis. Now doctors are looking ahead to President Bush joining his wife at home.
He is sitting up, watching TV, and is waiting anxiously for his favorite oyster stew for lunch.
Former President Bush and his wife celebrated their 72nd wedding anniversary earlier this month. Finally tonight, as Melania Trump steps into the role of First Lady, we go behind the scenes with former White House photographer Joyce Bogosian, who worked in the East Wing covering both Laura Bush and Michelle Obama.
The role of a First Lady is very important. It's a great window into the presidency. Having traveled with the First Lady, you wake up in another country or you land in the morning jet lagged and you hit the ground running. You want to give the viewer a different angle, maybe a behind the scenes angle of what they're like. First Lady Laura Bush was really a graceful, elegant person and brought real calmness to the White House, to the president, I think. She really handled the transition with grace as well. It's customary for the First Lady to give a tour to the incoming First Lady. I went in and shot a picture, and after one click, she said thank you, and I was glad it turned out. She and her daughters gave a private tour to Mrs. Obama and her mother and the girls, her daughters, and that was really fun to see. I was there on Inauguration Day. I went in the Oval and photographed the changing of the decorations. I covered Mrs. Obama for a few months. When she came in and took the role as First Lady, that was also different. Everywhere we went, hugging kids and kids hugging her, and it was really an amazing historic event, to see the change in power. When the new First Lady comes in, I hope that her chief of staff will also have a vision of capturing not only official events or unofficial, off-the-record events, but just family. Being a White House photographer, just to witness history firsthand. Sometimes you see yourself in a room with the president and the Pope, and you just wonder, what am I doing here? But you just have to remove yourself from that and just go on cruise control.
And we'll be watching for all of those special moments with the new First Lady. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Good night and God bless.